Racist cop arrests black doctor. What he does next leaves everyone speechless. A black man, dressed in a neat suit, drives a luxury car through town. Suddenly, flashing red and blue lights appear behind him. A white police officer steps out of his patrol car and walks up, his hand resting on his gun. The officer smirks and says, "This car doesn't belong to someone like you. Step out now." The man remains calm, even though he knows what this is about. Slowly, he gets out of the car, his steady voice hiding years of dealing with this kind of prejudice. People nearby stop to watch, some pulling out their phones to record. The tension in the air grows thicker as the officer pushes for answers, trying to find something wrong with this man. But what happens next takes everyone by surprise. The truth about who this man is and why he's here changes everything. It's a moment that no one expected, and one that leaves the officer, the crowd, and the entire town speechless. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. You won't want to miss what happens next. Dr. Marcus Taylor was not just any man. He was one of the most respected surgeons in the country. Known for his steady hands and brilliant mind, Marcus had saved countless lives. Despite his busy schedule, he remained humble and deeply connected to his family. He lived with his wife, Monica, a teacher, and their 2 children in a modest yet beautiful home. Marcus often spoke about his upbringing, the struggles of growing up as a black man in a world filled with challenges, and how he overcame them through sheer determination. The story takes place in the small town of Lakeview. On the surface, Lakeview looked like a peaceful place, with its quiet streets and friendly neighbors. But beneath the surface, it was a town divided. Racism lingered in many corners, and the community was no stranger to tension. The local police department, in particular, had gained a reputation for being unfair and targeting minorities. Among the officers was Rick Thompson. Rick had worked in Lakeview for over a decade and was well known, but not for good reasons. He was a man with a chip on his shoulder and a habit of abusing his authority. Rick had a history of pulling over black drivers, harassing them, and finding any excuse to exert his power. To Rick, Marcus was just another black man who didn't belong in the driver's seat of a luxury car. On a bright Sunday afternoon, Marcus was driving through town on his way to perform an emergency surgery that could save a young boy's life. Little did he know that his path was about to cross with Rick's. It was a moment that would forever change their lives and the town of Lakeview. As Marcus passed through the center of town, Rick noticed his car. The sight of the sleek, expensive vehicle instantly caught his attention. To Rick, it didn't matter who Marcus was or why he was there. What mattered was that a black man was driving a car that, in Rick's eyes, didn't belong to him. Rick pulled out behind Marcus, his lights flashing, and signaled him to stop. What happened next would not only shock Marcus and Rick, but also leave the entire town questioning its values. Dr. Marcus Taylor was driving through Lakeview's busiest street. His mind focused on the emergency surgery waiting for him at the hospital. The sleek black car he drove, a gift from a grateful patient, glided smoothly along the road. Suddenly, flashing red and blue lights appeared in his rearview mirror. Marcus's heart sank. He knew this was not just a routine stop. Officer Rick Thompson stepped out of his patrol car, his expression hard and unfriendly. He adjusted his belt, walked up to Marcus's car window, and knocked sharply. Marcus rolled the window down, keeping his hands visible on the steering wheel. "License and registration," Rick barked, not bothering with a greeting. Marcus calmly complied, handing over the documents without question. "Is there a problem, officer?" Marcus asked, his voice steady and polite. Rick looked over the documents briefly, then glanced at the car. "This car doesn't seem to match you," he sneered. "Where'd you get it? Stolen?" Marcus froze for a moment. "Officer, this is my car. I have all the necessary paperwork. If you check, everything will confirm that." But Rick wasn't interested in facts. He leaned closer, his tone dripping with suspicion. "You look nervous. Got something to hide? Drugs? Stolen goods? Step out of the car." Marcus hesitated, but knew resisting would escalate the situation. He unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out, standing tall and composed despite the humiliation. Rick immediately began patting him down, roughly checking his pockets and the inside of his jacket. A small crowd began to gather, drawn by the sight of the expensive car and the aggressive officer. Among them was Peter, a 15-year-old boy who had been walking home from the park. Peter pulled out his phone and began recording the interaction, sensing something wasn't right. Rick turned to the growing audience and smirked. "See this, folks? Just doing my job. Can't let criminals run free." His words carried a mocking tone, designed to demean Marcus in front of everyone. Despite Rick's aggressive behavior, Marcus remained calm. "Officer, I've done nothing wrong. I'm a doctor, on my way to save a patient's life. If you'll just—" Before Marcus could finish, Rick interrupted. "Save it. You people always have an excuse. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." Marcus's composure faltered slightly, but he complied. The cold metal of the handcuffs snapped around his wrists, and Rick shoved him toward the patrol car. "Officer, this is unnecessary," Marcus said, his voice firm but controlled. "There are witnesses here. Everything you're doing is being recorded." Rick smirked, glancing at Peter with his phone raised. "Let them record. It won't change anything." Peter's hands trembled as he continued filming, his heart racing. He couldn't believe what he was witnessing. A respected man, humiliated in broad daylight for no reason. The crowd whispered in disbelief, some murmuring support for Marcus, while others remained silent, unsure of how to react. Marcus stood by the patrol car, his dignity intact despite the situation. "You're making a mistake," he said firmly. "This will not end the way you think." Rick, still smug, didn't care. He searched Marcus's car, pulling out random items to justify his actions. He held up a medical bag and waved it mockingly. "What's this? Drugs?" "That's my medical equipment," Marcus said. "I'm a surgeon." Rick ignored him, continuing his search. But as the tension grew, so did the murmurs from the crowd. People began to question Rick's actions openly. "This doesn't seem right," an older man said. "He doesn't look like a criminal." Peter, still recording, stepped closer. "This is wrong," he said softly, more to himself than anyone else. But his words reflected the thoughts of many around him. The incident was no longer just about Marcus and Rick. It was becoming a public spectacle, a symbol of the divide in Lakeview. And though Marcus remained composed, he knew this moment was far from over. Marcus stood by the patrol car, his hands cuffed behind his back, his heart racing but his face calm. The crowd around them grew, their whispers turning into murmurs of protest. Rick, still confident in his authority, continued to rummage through Marcus's car, pulling out random items as if trying to prove his baseless accusations. Peter, the teenager recording everything, moved closer. His phone's camera captured every detail: the smirk on Rick's face, the dignified composure of Marcus, and the shocked expressions of onlookers. The boy's hands trembled, but he knew this footage was important. He whispered to a woman standing nearby, "They can't do this to him. He hasn't done anything." The woman nodded, her eyes narrowing as she focused on Rick. Others in the crowd began to speak up. "Why are you arresting him? He hasn't done anything wrong," shouted an older man. "This is harassment!" yelled another. Rick ignored them, his smirk fading as the crowd's energy shifted. "Everyone back off!" he barked, trying to regain control. "This is official police business." A soft but firm voice interrupted the tension. "Excuse me, officer." A woman stepped forward, her face calm but her tone steady. She was Sarah Collins, a local attorney known for her advocacy work in the community. She held up her phone, recording just like Peter. "I'm observing this incident, and I'd like to know what crime Dr. Taylor is being accused of." Rick shot her a glare. "Stay out of this. It's none of your business." Sarah didn't flinch. "Actually, it is my business when someone's rights are being violated. I know Dr. Taylor, and I also know the law." Marcus turned his head slightly, recognizing Sarah. Relief flickered in his eyes, though his expression remained steady. Sarah's presence bolstered the crowd. They began to murmur louder, their voices gaining confidence. Rick, now visibly irritated, pointed at Sarah. "If you don't back off, you'll be obstructing justice." Sarah crossed her arms, unfazed. "Justice? Is that what you call this? You've handcuffed a respected surgeon with no evidence, searched his car without probable cause, and humiliated him in front of an entire crowd. I'd love to see how you explain this in court." Rick hesitated, his grip on his authority slipping. The crowd, emboldened by Sarah's words, began voicing their support for Marcus more openly. "Let him go," a young man shouted. "We're all watching," added an elderly woman. Peter, still recording, felt a surge of hope. He stepped closer, holding his phone higher. "You can't keep doing this, officer. Everyone will see what you're doing." The weight of the crowd's judgment started to press on Rick. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead as he glanced around, realizing the situation was spiraling out of his control. Still, he refused to back down. "I'm just doing my job," he muttered, his voice losing its edge. "Then do it right," Sarah shot back. "Release him now before this gets worse for you." At that moment, another police car arrived, its siren wailing briefly before the officer stepped out. It was Sergeant Davis, Rick's superior. He looked at the scene. Marcus handcuffed, Rick digging through the car, and a growing agitated crowd, and immediately understood something was wrong. "Thompson," Davis called out, his tone sharp. "What's going on here?" Rick straightened, trying to regain his composure. "Caught this guy acting suspicious, just doing a routine check." Davis's gaze shifted to Marcus, then to the crowd, and finally to Sarah, who was now standing beside Marcus protectively. "Suspicious? Is that so?" Davis asked, his voice calm but laced with authority. "Dr. Taylor, is there a reason for this stop?" Marcus, still composed despite the humiliation, replied evenly. "No, Sergeant. I was driving to the hospital for an emergency surgery when I was pulled over without explanation." Sarah chimed in. "Sergeant, there's no probable cause for this. It's clear harassment, and the whole incident has been recorded." Davis frowned, sensing the gravity of the situation. He turned to Rick. "Is that true? Did you have a valid reason to stop him?" Rick faltered, his confidence unraveling. "I thought he looked suspicious. Driving a car like this, that's not a valid reason." Davis interrupted, his tone firm. "Uncuff him. Now." Rick hesitated, but under Davis's sharp glare, he finally reached for the cuffs. He unlocked them, and Marcus rubbed his wrists, his composure intact despite the ordeal. The crowd erupted into applause, cheering for Marcus and the justice they had witnessed. Davis turned to Marcus. "I apologize for this, Dr. Taylor. I'll make sure this is handled properly." Marcus nodded, his voice calm but firm. "I appreciate that, Sergeant, but this isn't just about me. This behavior needs to stop. For everyone." The crowd murmured in agreement, their earlier tension now replaced with a sense of triumph. Peter lowered his phone, his heart swelling with pride. He knew his recording would make a difference. As Rick stepped back, his face flushed with anger and humiliation, he realized his authority had crumbled. But this moment was no longer about him. It was about a community standing together, and a man who refused to let injustice silence him. Dr. Marcus Taylor sat quietly in the back of the police car. Despite being handcuffed and humiliated, he stayed calm. He knew he had done nothing wrong. Officer Rick Thompson sat in the driver's seat full of arrogance. He felt justified in his actions. Dr. Taylor finally broke his silence. He said, "I am a surgeon. A patient is waiting for me at the hospital. They need me to save their life." Officer Thompson smirked and replied, "That is what they all say." Dr. Taylor knew he had to stay composed, but every moment lost was putting a life in danger. At the same time, Peter, the young boy who recorded the incident, uploaded the video online. The clip started spreading quickly on social media. Thousands of people began sharing it. The caption read, "A doctor arrested for no reason." Comments poured in. People were outraged. Influential figures began demanding justice. News outlets picked up the story. Reporters reached out for more details. The video was now the center of attention. Back at the police station, other officers began to notice the tension. One senior officer approached Dr. Taylor. He asked why he was arrested. Dr. Taylor calmly explained his situation. He said, "I am supposed to be in surgery right now." A senior officer quickly realized something was wrong. He stepped away to make a call. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the staff was desperate. They tried to contact Dr. Taylor, but he was unreachable. The patient's condition was getting worse. Calls were made to the police department demanding to know where Dr. Taylor was. The pressure began to build. Officer Thompson started to feel the weight of his actions. The station phones were ringing non-stop. Social media was exploding with anger. People were gathering outside the station demanding answers. Officer Thompson's smirk started to fade. He had no idea this would spiral into something so big. He thought it was just another routine stop. Now the entire town was watching. Dr. Taylor remained calm. He knew the truth would come out. The community's support was growing. The hospital staff kept calling. The senior officer began asking serious questions. Officer Thompson started to feel cornered. He looked at Dr. Taylor through the rearview mirror. For the first time, he began to realize he had made a terrible mistake. The news of Officer Thompson's actions spread faster than anyone could have imagined. Peter's video, raw and unedited, captured the humiliating and discriminatory treatment Dr. Taylor endured. Within hours, it was shared across social media platforms, igniting conversations about racism, abuse of power, and justice. The video showed Dr. Taylor, a respected black surgeon, being treated as though he were a criminal, and people were outraged. In homes, cafes, and workplaces, the video became the center of discussion, with people asking how such blatant racism could still exist. Soon, hashtags like "Justice for Dr. Taylor" and "Stop Racism" started trending. Social media users expressed their anger and shared messages of solidarity. Influential voices, including activists, community leaders, and even celebrities, commented on the injustice. Dr. Taylor's calm demeanor under the immense pressure and humiliation struck a chord with millions. He became a symbol of dignity and resilience in the face of discrimination. In the small town where the incident occurred, the streets began to fill with people. Protesters of all ages, races, and backgrounds gathered outside the police station. They carried signs that read, "Justice for all," and "End police brutality." Their chants echoed through the streets, calling for accountability and change. Families came with their children to teach them the importance of standing up for what is right. Students left their classrooms to join the movement, and local business owners shut down their stores in solidarity. The protests grew larger with each passing day. What started as a small gathering soon turned into a massive rally. People from neighboring towns arrived to join the cause. The voices of the protesters were loud and unwavering. They demanded that Officer Thompson face consequences for his actions and that the police department take steps to address systemic racism within their ranks. As the protests intensified, more stories began to emerge. Other victims of Officer Thompson found the courage to come forward. They shared their own experiences of discrimination, harassment, and abuse at his hands. Some described being pulled over without cause and being subjected to baseless accusations. Others spoke of being humiliated in front of their families or even losing jobs due to false charges filed by Thompson. These stories painted a damning picture of a man who had used his badge as a shield for prejudice. Local newspapers began covering these accounts, and the story gained more traction. Television crews arrived to capture the growing movement. Interviews with the victims brought tears to viewers' eyes and fueled the growing anger. It became clear that what happened to Dr. Taylor was not an isolated incident. Officer Thompson's actions were part of a larger pattern of discrimination that had gone unchecked for years. The police department could no longer remain silent. The growing protests, coupled with the national attention the incident had garnered, forced their hand. At a press conference, the police chief, visibly tense, addressed the public. He announced that an internal investigation would be conducted into Officer Thompson's conduct. As a precaution, Thompson was placed on suspension pending the outcome of the investigation. The announcement was met with mixed reactions. Some saw it as a step in the right direction. Others believed it was merely a way for the department to save face. The protesters continued to demand not only Thompson's termination, but also a complete overhaul of the department's policies and practices. National news outlets picked up the story, turning it into a symbol of the fight against racial injustice. Dr. Taylor's name became synonymous with the struggle for equality and accountability. He was approached for interviews, but remained humble and focused. He thanked the community for their overwhelming support, but urged them to keep their protests peaceful. "This is about more than one man," he said. "It's about ensuring that no one else has to face what I did. Let's fight for change, but let's do it with dignity." Despite the public backlash, Thompson showed no remorse. Confined to his home after his suspension, he was defiant. He refused to acknowledge his wrongdoing and instead blamed the public and the media for blowing the situation out of proportion. However, he could not ignore the growing isolation. His neighbors avoided him, and his colleagues distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. Meanwhile, the protests continued to grow. The community's unity and determination were on full display. Local leaders began organizing workshops and discussions about racial bias and accountability. Churches and schools hosted events to educate people about the importance of equality and justice. The movement was no longer just about Officer Thompson. It was about challenging the systemic issues that allowed such behavior to persist. Peter, the young boy who recorded the video, became a local hero. His quick thinking and bravery ensured that the truth could not be silenced. He received messages of gratitude from people across the country. Dr. Taylor, proud of the role Peter played, reminded him that standing up for what is right is the first step toward change. As days turned into weeks, the protests showed no signs of slowing down. Community leaders worked tirelessly to ensure that the momentum was not lost. They drafted petitions demanding policy changes, such as mandatory bias, training for officers, and the establishment of an independent review board to oversee complaints against the police. The petitions quickly gathered thousands of signatures. Dr. Taylor, despite the personal toll the incident had taken on him, joined the efforts to bring about change. He attended rallies and spoke to the crowd, emphasizing the need for unity and action. His words inspired many to take a stand. "We cannot let hate win," he said. "We must build a community where everyone feels safe and valued." The national attention continued to grow. Activists and organizations from across the country reached out to offer support. Prominent figures in the civil rights movement praised the community's efforts and called for widespread reform. The small town became a symbol of resistance and hope. Amid the public outcry, Officer Thompson's suspension was extended as the investigation uncovered more evidence of his misconduct. The police chief, under immense pressure, vowed to take decisive action. The community waited anxiously, knowing that the outcome of the investigation would set a precedent. This moment was a turning point for the town. The incident had revealed deep-seated issues, but it also brought people together in a way they had never experienced before. The fight for justice was far from over, but the community's resilience and unity gave them hope. Through their unwavering determination, the people sent a powerful message. Discrimination and abuse of power have no place in their town or anywhere else. The movement sparked by one incident had grown into a call for change that resonated far and wide. It was a reminder that when people stand together, they can challenge injustice and create a better future for all. In the days following the events, the town witnessed a shift it had never seen before. People started reflecting on what had happened, realizing how deeply rooted the issues of discrimination and injustice were in their community. Dr. Marcus Taylor became a symbol of courage and persistence. His ability to remain calm and composed even in the face of blatant discrimination inspired countless people in the town and beyond. Dr. Taylor's experience and the changes it sparked reminded everyone that standing up for what is right is never easy, but is always worth it. His Foundation for Diversity and Inclusion began hosting workshops and events that brought people from all backgrounds together. These gatherings encouraged dialogue, understanding, and a commitment to a better future. Officer Rick Thompson, now retired from the force, started attending these workshops. His remorse was genuine, and his journey of understanding showed the community that change, while difficult, is possible, even for those who have made grave mistakes. He shared his story in schools and community events, urging others not to follow the path he once walked. The transformation of the town did not happen overnight, but it began with a single act of courage. Dr. Taylor's actions showed that persistence, dignity, and truth could break through even the most entrenched systems of injustice. His story became a powerful example for future generations. The message was clear. Change is possible if people are willing to fight for it. The events left a lasting impact on everyone involved. The young boy, Peter, whose video helped expose the truth, became an advocate for justice in his school and community. His bravery in recording the incident taught others that small actions can lead to big changes. Dr. Taylor, now a leading voice in the fight for equality, ended his speeches with the same powerful message: we can make the world a better place, one step at a time. It starts with standing up, speaking out, and never losing hope. As the sun set on the town, its streets filled with the sounds of laughter and unity, the people of the community knew they had started a journey toward healing and change. The incident that once divided them had now brought them together, proving that courage and determination can transform not only individuals, but entire societies. What would you do in a situation like this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know how stories like this inspire you to take action in your community. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that make you think and spark change.